Hello, my name is Jamie Johnson, and it is a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend our webinar regarding the ALTA best practices. We will try to keep this webinar brief yet informative. The webinar is one of our series of free webinars to introduce you to the title industry best practices. The series is intended to teach you in a convenient place, your own office or home, without taking a lot of time out of your busy schedule. We will be offering several webinars on the best practices so that you and your staff can get exactly the information you need when you need it. Before we get started, I wanted to share just a few things about me. I've been involved in the title industry for over 16 years. I've been a compliance officer for title agencies since 2007, long before the industry even realized the need for a compliance officer in a title agency. I've been involved with lender audits for more than 6 years. Personally, being involved in numerous lender audits in my career, especially as large banks have started gearing up for these regulatory enforcements. These have included off-site and on-site audits. Off-site audits involve sending our documentation to the lender or their representative for review. On-site audits involve an auditor coming to our offices to review our policies and procedures. And now my job is to help other title agencies prepare for upcoming audits and third-party certifications. From my experience, I recommend that you keep all of your written policies and procedures in as organized a fashion as possible, as it will greatly help come audit time. Make sure your staff members are well informed of your policies and procedures. I've been involved in audits where even entry-level employees have been called into a conference room and asked to explain the procedures for their job. For those of you who have not attended a seminar on best practice materials, what exactly do I mean when I'm speaking of best practices? Well, today we're going to talk about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, referred to as the CFPB, who it is, and what it means for your business. We're also going to talk about the American Land Title Association, the ALTA's, title insurance and settlement company best practices, which I will refer to as just the best practices for the majority of this presentation. These were created to address concerns regarding new regulations and agency vetting issues that were born as a result of the CFPB's regulations. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, also known as the CFPB, issued a bulletin providing this expectation. The CFPB expects supervised banks and non-banks to have an effective process for managing the risk of service provider relationships. But you aren't running a bank, I presume, so why does this bulletin concern you? Let's back up and have a brief history lesson. The recent financial crisis that began in 2007 was determined to be caused by an overinflated real estate market, questionable lending practices, a lack of consistent regulations, and a lack of regulations in general. In order to address those concerns and to find ways to better protect the consumer, the government stepped in and created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, an independent federal agency that holds the primary responsibility for regulating consumer protection with regards to financial products and services in the United States. Have you heard of the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act? In 1999, the GLB Act was enacted. With the passage of the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, lenders were largely deregulated, which created circumstances that are said to have helped create the financial crisis. In order to regain the regulation lost by the GLB, and in the wake of the global financial crisis and recession that began in 2007, attention turned toward perceived regulatory failures to restrain excessive risk-taking and questionable practices. On July 21, 2010, the Dodd-Frank Act was enacted. The Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act was one of the most significant regulatory reform measures since the Great Depression. The CFPB was created in 2011 after its conception was included as part of the Dodd-Frank Act. Their primary purpose is to protect the consumer in financial transactions. The scope of the CFPB is broad, and many businesses regulated by the CFPB are still trying to determine exactly how to comply with the new regulations imposed by the Bureau. So now that I've run through some of the history, let's get to the most important part. You. Specifically, how does all of this affect you? Let's take a look back at the CFPB bulletin I referenced earlier. The CFPB expects supervised banks and non-banks to have an effective process for managing the risk of service provider relationships. Under the Dodd-Frank Act, a service provider is defined as any person that provides a material service to a covered person in connection with the offering or provision by such covered person of a consumer financial product or service. A service provider may or may not be affiliated with the party to whom services are provided. This means that your agency is considered to be a service provider and that your lenders are responsible for managing the risk that your actions may potentially bring to the lender and its consumers, regardless of whether your agency is affiliated with that lender. Once the CFPB released this bulletin, it seemed almost immediately that several vetting companies began to pop up, offering to help lenders with their vendor management programs. These companies would offer to vet or audit settlement service providers and provide approved settlement agent lists to lenders. They claimed that the lenders could rely on these third-party audits as part of their risk management plans. While some of these companies may have provided valid, reliable services to lenders, there were a lot of concerns by the industry. Some lenders liked the idea, and you may have received a letter informing you of an upcoming audit. These companies offered to approve the agent and the agency based upon a risk analysis of various criteria. This usually required the agency to release a lot of confidential information to a third party who had not been vetted or approved by any agency or group. Each vetting company required various information in order to give their approval, and there were no standard guidelines for these companies to follow. The vetting process was to be completed annually at a cost to the agent. And remember, there were multiple providers offering these services, so you potentially would need to be vetted by multiple companies every year. There were industry-wide concerns regarding privacy, but also concerns regarding any consumer information that potentially could be a part of the audit process. How could we ensure the standards for the auditing process was standard across all the various companies? What happened if your audit resulted in a negative finding? Would your company be blacklisted? Were there steps to improve your rating? How would we even know where the line was for each company's passing and failing marks? Could you challenge the results of an audit? Thankfully, the ALTA was listening to the concerns of its members and the industry and devised a method to help lenders and the agents come up with an agreed upon industry standard vetting process. Their comprehensive solution, the best practices, is a voluntary tool designed to help protect consumers while allowing agents to demonstrate compliance with regulatory concerns, allowing successful inclusion in a lender's third-party service provider risk management program. I do want to say that many of the lenders' vendor risk management programs are still being created. The ALTA recommends that you reach out to your lender clients and start a dialogue with them. This is a great opportunity to let them know the processes and procedures you already have in place to protect them and their clients. Talk to them about their vendor programs and ask what risk analysis they are planning and working on. I do caution that the ALTA's guidelines might not be the end-all be-all solution for every size lender. There's still a good chance that you will have to be prepared for additional audits and vetting, whether by the lender directly or a third party to whom they outsource the work. However, do not discount these best practices. They are a great guide to getting you started on the minimum you should do for preparation of future assessments and audits. Getting your documentation together on these recommended practices is sure to take away a lot of the pain of your audits. It's really worth it to make the time now to begin documenting your processes and procedures. Let's take a brief look at the ALTA best practices. Our next webinar will address the best practices in further detail. The ALTA took the concept of best practices and broke them into 7 more manageable parts. These are called pillars. Pillar 1 is to establish and maintain current licenses. For Pillar 1, you need to keep copies of current business licenses and maintain compliance with the applicable state regulatory department or agencies. This includes title insurance licenses, authority to do business licenses, and even the ALTA policy license. Pillar 2 is to maintain written procedures and controls for escrow trust accounts. You likely already have processes and controls in place for your escrow accounts, but be sure your processes and procedures are documented. Be sure your staff has received the appropriate training on your written processes and procedures in regards to your escrow account. This training must be documented and all records retained. Pillar 3 involves physical and network security, protecting money and confidential consumer information. This section is a doozy. It involves adopting and maintaining a written privacy and information security program to protect non-public personal information as required by local, state, and federal law. Title agencies have access to lots of personal private information. Your agency should already have privacy notices and privacy protections in place. You're required to have a written program in place that details the steps that you take every day to protect this confidential data. Pillar 4 involves ensuring consistent pricing and refund of overpayments, and making sure that you record your documents in a timely manner. It requires that your agency have documented procedures and policies to help you comply with federal and state consumer protection laws that apply to the settlement process. Pillar 5, deliver your title policies, report and remit premium in a timely manner. Documentation of procedures for production, delivery, and remittance of title insurance policies ensures that you will meet your legal and contractual obligations. Pillar 6, maintain professional liability insurance and bonding. Maintaining proper insurances ensures that your agency maintains the financial capacity to stand behind your professional services. And finally, Pillar 7, respond to customer complaints in a timely manner. This means having a documented process and complaint log for receiving and addressing consumer complaints. This helps ensure that reported instances of poor service or non-compliance do not go undiscovered. Most of you probably have processes and procedures in place that address the majority of these items. However, you cannot just do or say that you do these best practices. You're going to have to demonstrate your compliance by having documentation for each policy and procedure. Your staff has to be trained on all of your company policies, and that training must be documented. Do you feel your company is ready for an audit? Take a look at the ALTA's assessment guidebook available on the ALTA website. This guide is a sample for the auditor that will ultimately review your agency's best practices. The ALTA envisioned this guidebook to be used to address concerns of a standardized audit process. Using the guide provides a clear and standardized audit process that can be used regardless of your agency's size or location. The assessment standards make the pass-fail lines clear, and a lender should be able to easily compare agencies based upon completion of the assessment. If you want to see how you stand up, use this form as a self-assessment for your agency. The assessment is meant to occur every 2 years by a third party that's deemed acceptable by your lender. Once you've passed the assessment, the ALTA has a sample certification package on their website. The certification package is composed of 3 parts. You are to provide a separate package containing all 3 pieces to each of your lender clients upon request to demonstrate your compliance with the best practices. First, there is a letter issued by you and on your company letterhead addressed to each client. This letter informs the client that you have successfully completed the assessment. Next, you'll provide the lender with a copy of a certificate of compliance signed by the entity who completed your agency's certification. Finally, you also provide current declaration pages for each insurance policy you maintain for the agency. I have provided you with some links to the resources that I have talked about today. The American Land Title Association. You can also get some great information on the Better Business Bureau's Code of Business Practices, and then, of course, the Consumer Financial Protection Agency. I've also included information about our solution, Best Practices Plus, and I'd like to take you a few moments to tell you a little bit about our product. Best Practices Plus is a comprehensive solution designed to automate the creation of your customized policies and procedures manual. It fulfills all areas recommended in the ALTA's best practices. Best Practices Plus has a secure login, accessible from home or work, anywhere that you have internet access. You can create multiple user accounts. This allows you to assign questions to other users who have an expertise in that field. For example, you can assign questions relating to network security to the IT staff member who is best qualified. The software has a dashboard that shows at a glance the progress all of your users have made. Once the questions have been answered, you're able to print or save your completed compliance manual. Complete your compliance manual by answering simple questions. Most questions have multiple choice or suggested answers whenever possible to help simplify the process. For every question, you're able to upload supporting documentation that will be incorporated into your final manual. You can access and complete your manual on the go. Best Practices Plus is mobile friendly for your tablet, cell phone, or other mobile devices. I want to thank you for attending our webinar today. I've provided my contact information. Please feel free to contact me directly anytime after this webinar with any questions you may have. You can create a free trial account at bestpracticesplus.com. Go ahead and try our software with no obligation. No payment information is required. I think you will find it a valuable, easy-to-use tool in the creation of your comprehensive, customized best practices documentation.